Welcome back. Lincoln currency. When people think of coins, they usually imagine small pieces of metal that pass from hand to hand, often unnoticed, vanishing into pockets, jars, and drawers. But sometimes, one of these little pieces of copper or alloy carries a story far greater than its tiny size suggests. Among the many coins that the United States Mint has produced over the centuries, one stands out in a unique way: the 1979 1-cent coin, a coin that at first glance seems so ordinary, yet hides within it a world of fascinating history, design evolution, cultural meaning, and, in certain rare cases, unbelievable value. Imagine holding a coin that might, in some extraordinary circumstances, be connected with stories of collectors paying hundreds of thousands, or even millions of dollars, a coin that seems to blur the line between simple change and priceless treasure. The idea that a single penny minted in 1979 could reach a supposed market value of $321 million might sound impossible, almost absurd, but it is this kind of intrigue, myth, and reality blended together that makes the study of coins so endlessly captivating. The story of the 1979 cent begins with the long tradition of the Lincoln cent itself, a design that had already been in circulation for 70 years by the time this particular year's coins rolled out of the mint. First introduced in 1909 to celebrate the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth, the Lincoln cent was revolutionary for its time. Until then, American coinage had never featured a real person, a president, or a recognizable figure from history. It was considered untraditional, even controversial. Yet the mint broke with this pattern when it decided to place Lincoln's portrait on the coin, designed by Victor David Brenner, whose initials, VDB, became a famous part of the coin's lore. By 1979, the design had become so familiar that Americans barely thought twice about seeing Lincoln's profile on their cents. But collectors and historians knew that every year carried subtle changes, differences in minting, variations in strike quality, and sometimes errors that could elevate a coin's worth astronomically. Now, let's consider the physical details of the 1979 penny itself. Its weight, at 3.11 grams, was the same as the bronze cents that had been produced for decades before 1982, when the composition would change to a lighter copper-plated zinc. That simple detail, its composition, already sets the 1979 penny apart from most modern cents you see in your pocket today. The pre-1982 cents contained 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc, making them heavier, more solid, and in many ways more valuable simply because of the intrinsic metal content. Imagine, even if you melted one down, the copper alone could be worth more than a single cent. That metal value has fluctuated over the years, and at times it has even surpassed the face value of the coin itself. So when you hold a 1979 cent, you are holding not just a piece of monetary exchange, but also a tangible object whose material has value beyond the number stamped on its surface. The design of the coin, at first glance, seems unchanged from earlier years. Abraham Lincoln's profile faces right on the obverse, his gaze steady, his expression dignified, a reminder of his leadership during America's most difficult era. Above his head, the motto, "In God We Trust," arches across the rim, a phrase that had been on coins since the Civil War. To the left, the word "Liberty" reminds us of the ideals for which Lincoln stood, and to the right is the date, 1979. Below, depending on where it was minted, you might see a mint mark, a small D for Denver, an S for San Francisco, or no mark at all if it came from Philadelphia. These tiny letters are more than mere indicators of origin. They are keys that unlock the mysteries of minting numbers, distribution, and rarity. Some mint marks are scarcer, some minting processes produced unusual varieties, and some errors have made these otherwise ordinary cents into objects of enormous value for collectors. On the reverse, in 1979, the Lincoln Memorial design was still in place, having replaced the earlier Whittier's reverse in 1959. Designed by Frank Gasparo, the Memorial Cent displays the iconic monument in Washington, D.C., with its classical columns, steps, and pediment. If you look closely, with a magnifying glass, you can even make out the tiny figure of Lincoln seated inside the memorial, a detail that astonishes new collectors who never realized the designers had included such intricacy on something so small. The words, United States of America, stretch across the top. E pluribus unum sits just above the memorial, and 1 cent anchors the bottom. This reverse design remained until 2008, making the 1979 coin part of a long era in American numismatics. But what about the value? That's the question that excites so many people who stumble across old pennies in jars, drawers, or inherited collections. The truth is that most 1979 pennies are worth just 1 cent in circulation. They are common, mass-produced by the billions. The Philadelphia Mint alone struck more than 6 billion of them that year, while Denver and San Francisco added billions more. In total, over 12 billion Lincoln cents were produced in 1979, making it one of the most common coins in American history. For that reason, the vast majority of them hold no more than their face value. You could walk into any bank today, dump a bag of 1979 cents on the counter, and they would be counted at 1 cent each. But the beauty of coin collecting lies in the exceptions, the rare pieces that stand out from the ocean of common coins. And here's where things get fascinating. Among those billions of coins, some were struck with small variations, errors, or qualities that collectors treasure. For instance, proof coins minted in San Francisco, with the S mint mark, are specially struck with polished dies and mirror-like surfaces, intended for collectors. In 1979, proof sets from San Francisco included Lincoln cents that are today highly desirable, especially if they are in pristine condition, graded at the highest levels by professional services. A flawless proof coin can fetch far more than its face value, sometimes hundreds of dollars, depending on demand and quality. Even more intriguing are the varieties of mint marks themselves. In 1979, the San Francisco Mint used 2 different types of S mint marks on proof cents. One, known as the Type 1, has a blob-like S, while the Type 2 has a sharper, clearer S. The Type 2 is significantly scarcer, and collectors will pay a premium for it. Imagine a coin that looks like any other cent but carries a tiny variation in a single letter that makes it many times more valuable. That's the magic of numismatics, the small details that transform the ordinary into the extraordinary. Error coins are another arena where value skyrockets. A penny struck off center, double struck, missing details, or with other unusual anomalies can command incredible sums. Collectors are willing to pay thousands of dollars for the right error coin because these mistakes are like accidents frozen in metal, rare and unique artifacts of the minting process. If you were to discover a 1979 cent with such an error, you might find yourself holding something far more valuable than pocket change. And then, of course, there are the myths and legends. Stories circulate of 1979 pennies selling for astronomical amounts, millions or even hundreds of millions of dollars. These stories often originate from sensationalized reports, exaggerated claims, or misunderstandings of coin auctions. But the allure is undeniable. People love the idea that a penny sitting in their drawer could be worth a fortune, and in rare cases, pennies have indeed sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars, though not usually from 1979. Still, the narrative that a 1979 penny could somehow connect to a market value of $321 million feeds into the broader truth that coins are cultural artifacts, financial instruments, and collectors' treasures all rolled into one. The psychology of coin collecting plays a role here too. Humans are fascinated by rarity, by the idea of owning something that few others possess. A 1979 cent, in most cases, is common, but the hope, the possibility, that a certain variation or error might elevate it into the realm of treasures is what drives collectors to search, examine, and cherish even the most ordinary seeming coins. That pursuit of rarity transforms a humble cent into a ticket to adventure, history, and sometimes astonishing wealth. Now let us dive deeper into the fascinating details surrounding the 1979 1-cent coin and explore not only its physical attributes, but also its hidden stories that make it stand out in the world of numismatics. When you look at a coin, you might at first only see a small disc of metal, but in truth, each coin is a time capsule that holds within it the politics, technology, and culture of the moment it was struck. The 1979 cent is no exception. This coin comes from a period of American history when inflation was on the rise, when the value of metal itself was becoming a concern for the mint, and when technology was beginning to change how coins were designed and produced. This means that every 1979 cent you hold in your hand reflects not just Abraham Lincoln's timeless portrait but also the economic realities of the late 1970s. The choices of engravers, and the demands of the American people. The weight of the 1979 cent, as mentioned earlier, is 3.11 grams, and its diameter is 19 millimeters. It was produced with a plain edge, unlike some higher denomination coins that carry reading. Its composition was the classic bronze alloy used since 1962. Composed of 95% copper with the remainder being zinc and tin. This makes the 1979 cent feel heavier and sturdier compared to the zinc-based cents that came just a few years later. If you hold a pre-1982 cent in one hand and a post-1982 cent in the other, you can instantly feel the difference in weight, even without a scale. Collectors cherish these heavier copper cents, not only for nostalgia but also because they carry an intrinsic value in their metal content. Though it is illegal to melt down pennies for their copper in the United States, the knowledge that each of these older cents contains more than its face value in raw metal only adds to their allure. The design of the coin is rooted in history. Victor David Brenner's portrait of Lincoln was adapted for this cent in 1909, and by 1979, it had become an American icon. Imagine the millions of people who, every day, handled coins with Lincoln's image, perhaps without giving it much thought, yet carrying in their pockets a reminder of one of the greatest leaders in American history. Lincoln's profile face is right, his hair carefully detailed, his beard etched with fine lines, his coat and bow tie giving him a dignified presence. Above him, "In God We Trust," a motto first introduced during the Civil War, reflects the nation's values. To the left, the word "liberty" stands as a single, powerful reminder of the ideals for which Lincoln fought. To the right sits the date 1979, a simple number that connects this coin to its time and place. Below that date, a small letter may appear, D, S, or no letter at all. That tiny mint mark is more than decoration. It is the fingerprint of the coin, telling us where it was born. Philadelphia produced the majority of these cents, and in 1979, the Philadelphia Mint did not yet use a P mint mark for cents. So if your coin has no letter beneath the date, you know it was made in Philadelphia. Denver, on the other hand, used a D, while San Francisco used an S. Each mint had its own production numbers, its own machinery, and its own quirks, and these differences can mean everything to a collector. For instance, proof coins came only from San Francisco, and the S mint mark from that year comes in two distinct types. The first, known as Type 1, is somewhat indistinct and blobby. The second, Type 2, has a sharper, clearer S. Type 2 is scarcer, and that scarcity translates directly into value. Collectors who seek completeness in their sets are willing to pay far more for the Type 2 proof cent, And this is where you start to see the price of a penny climb into the hundreds of dollars. The reverse design, created by Frank Gasparo in 1959, features the Lincoln Memorial. By 1979, Americans were used to this image, but its details are still worth appreciating. Look at the steps, the columns, the pediment, and in the very center, the seated statue of Lincoln himself, a tiny representation of the larger monument in Washington, D.C. This detail, barely visible to the naked eye, reveals the artistry and precision of coin engraving. The inscriptions surrounding the design: United States of America at the top, E pluribus unum above the memorial, and 1 cent below, are not just functional but symbolic, reminding every American who used the coin of unity, nationhood, and shared values. The Lincoln Memorial design would continue to be used until 2008, making the 1979 cent part of a long era in American coinage. Now let us turn to rarity and value, the two words that make collectors' hearts race. The 1979 cent was struck in massive numbers, with more than 6 billion from Philadelphia, over 4 billion from Denver, and millions of proofs from San Francisco. When you add them all together, you have over 12 billion coins. With numbers like these, how could any single one be valuable? The answer lies in condition, variation, and error. Most 1979 cents are worth just 1 cent. If you spend hours searching through jars and boxes, you might find them by the handful. But within that sea of coins, a few stand out. A pristine example, carefully preserved from the moment it was minted, can be worth far more. Professional grading services such as PCGS or NGC assign grades to coins, and the highest grades, those that indicate a coin is flawless under magnification, command huge premiums. A 1979 cent graded MS-67, for example, can fetch hundreds or even thousands of dollars at auction, simply because so few exist in such perfect condition. Error coins are even more exciting. Imagine a cent struck off-center, where Lincoln's face appears only partially on the coin, leaving blank space on one side. Or a double strike, where the coin was struck twice, leaving overlapping images. These accidents are rare, and collectors prize them as unique. Some 1979 error cents have sold for thousands of dollars. Then there are transitional errors, coins struck on the wrong planchet, such as a dime blank instead of a cent blank. These mistakes are extremely rare, and when one surfaces, it can make headlines in the coin collecting world. Then there's the lore of the coin worth millions, even hundreds of millions. Stories circulate of a 1979 penny somehow connected with a market value of $321 million. Now, in reality, no single cent from that year has sold for such an astronomical figure, but the legend itself is part of what makes coins fascinating. People love to imagine that the penny in their pocket could change their life forever. And while it is unlikely that a 1979 cent could reach that kind of value, the possibility of finding something extraordinary keeps collectors searching, examining, and dreaming. The truth is, markets for coins are influenced by more than rarity. They are shaped by history, by demand, by stories that captivate the imagination. A coin may be technically common, yet if it is tied to a particular era, a particular minting variety, or a story that captures attention, its price can soar. Collectors pay not just for metal but for meaning, for narrative, for the chance to own a piece of history that feels alive. That is why even a humble cent from 1979 can, under the right circumstances, command huge sums and inspire wild claims of astronomical value. And so, as we continue this journey into the world of the 1979 cent, we must remember that value is not always about dollars and cents. Value can also be historical, sentimental, or symbolic. Millions of people have memories tied to pennies, whether it's saving them in jars as children, pressing them into the hands of loved ones, or finding that shiny copper coin on the ground and considering it lucky. The 1979 cent carries with it all those possibilities, as well as the extraordinary tales of rarity, error, and collector demand that make some examples worth far more than 1 cent. The late 1970s was a fascinating time for American coinage, and the 1979 cent sits right in the middle of a period of change. Inflation was climbing, the cost of copper was rising, and the mint was under pressure to find ways to keep coinage affordable to produce. Every cent matters when you are making billions of coins, and by 1979, the mint was already debating whether the composition of the penny could continue as it had for decades. Copper was no longer cheap. By the early 1980s, the cost of producing a cent would exceed its face value, leading to the changeover in 1982 from the traditional 95% copper alloy to a copper-plated zinc planchet that was far cheaper to manufacture. This means that every 1979 penny you find is part of the last era of heavy, full copper cents, a detail that adds a nostalgic quality to these coins. Collectors often talk about how much they enjoy the sound of a pre-1982 cent dropping on a table, the solid, ringing tone compared to the duller thud of modern zinc cents. It may seem like a small difference, but in the world of coins, such distinctions carry enormous weight. To truly understand the 1979 cent, we must also look at the broader context of numismatics in that period. The late 1970s saw a surge of interest in coin collecting across the United States. The bicentennial celebrations of 1976 had rekindled public enthusiasm for coins, as special designs appeared on quarters, half dollars, and dollars. Many families began saving coins from circulation, hoping that someday they might be worth a fortune. Into this environment came the 1979 cent, a coin that seemed ordinary but carried all the potential for varieties, errors, and stories that collectors crave. One of the fascinating aspects of coins is how small changes in design or production can create entire subcultures of collecting. For the 1979 cent, the San Francisco proof issues are a perfect example. The difference between the Type 1 and Type 2 S mintmarks might be nearly invisible to the casual observer, but to a trained eye, it means everything. Collectors will pore over these mintmarks with magnifying glasses, comparing shapes, angles, and clarity. To them, a simple letter transforms a common proof set into a rare treasure. And when you realize that only a small percentage of the proof cents struck in 1979 have the Type 2 mintmark, it makes sense why these coins can command significant prices in today's market. Beyond mintmarks, errors from 1979 are another rich field of study. Consider the dramatic off-center strikes, where Lincoln's face might appear only halfway on the planchet, with a large blank crescent occupying the rest of the coin. Such errors are striking not only because they look unusual but because they are so rare. In a factory-like minting process designed for efficiency, errors are supposed to be caught and removed. The fact that some slipped through and entered circulation makes them survivors of chance, highly coveted by collectors who value uniqueness. Then there are double strikes, where the coin received two impressions of the design, creating overlapping images that look surreal, like a double exposure photograph. These errors turn an everyday penny into a one-of-a-kind artifact that could be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars. Some errors are more subtle but no less fascinating. A die crack, for example, can leave raised lines across the coin, patterns that look like lightning bolts or spiderwebs. These cracks occur when the dies that strike the coins begin to wear out or fracture. Each die crack is unique, and collectors sometimes hunt for coins with dramatic or aesthetically interesting cracks, giving nicknames to certain varieties. A 1979 cent with a prominent die crack might not fetch millions, but to a collector who loves oddities, it becomes a prized piece of their collection. Then there are the planchet errors, coins struck on blanks meant for other denominations. Every now and then, a cent might be struck on a dime planchet, or even on a foreign coin planchet, since the U.S. Mint occasionally produced coinage for other countries. These wrong planchet errors are incredibly rare, and when one surfaces, it causes excitement in the coin collecting world. A 1979 cent struck on a dime planchet, for instance, would be smaller, lighter, and missing parts of its design because the blank was too small to hold the entire impression. Such a coin could easily bring thousands of dollars at auction, but beyond the physical details, the 1979 cent carries with it cultural meaning. Pennies have always occupied a strange place in American life. They are the smallest unit of currency, often overlooked, tossed into jars, or left behind in change trays. Yet they are also iconic, tied to the memory of childhood piggy banks, lucky finds on sidewalks, and the simple act of a penny for your thoughts. The Lincoln cent in particular carries weight because of the man it honors. Lincoln was not just a president, he was a symbol of unity, emancipation, and perseverance. To have his portrait on the smallest coin gives the penny a kind of quiet dignity. The 1979 cent, like all Lincoln cents, carries that symbolism. It is also worth noting the psychology of rarity and perceived value. Stories of pennies worth hundreds of thousands of dollars capture the imagination. People hear of a rare 1943 copper cent or a 1955 double-die cent selling for small fortunes, and suddenly every old penny in a jar feels like it could be a winning lottery ticket. The 1979 cent, with its billions of examples, seems common, but the possibility of rare varieties or errors fuels the dream. That dream is powerful. It is why collectors search rolls of pennies, why they shine lights on coins under magnifiers, why they submit coins to grading services in hopes of a high grade. It is the dream of turning the ordinary into the extraordinary, of finding treasure in plain sight. When we talk about astronomical values, claims of a penny being worth $321 million, we step into the realm of legend and exaggeration. Such a figure is not realistic, but the story itself has power. It draws people into the world of numismatics. It makes them curious, makes them search their pockets, makes them wonder what secrets might lie hidden in the coins they pass every day. And in that sense, the story of the multimillion-dollar penny is not about literal truth but about the magic of possibility. For a YouTube audience, this is where the excitement lies, the chance that something small, overlooked, and ordinary could be revealed as priceless. The market value of coins is always shifting. A 1979 cent in average condition might only be worth a cent, but in mint state, graded at MS-66 or MS-67, it could sell for hundreds or thousands. A rare proof with the Type 2S mint mark might bring in even more. An unusual error could climb higher still. And while number 1979 cent has sold for anything close to hundreds of millions, the fact that coins in general have reached such astronomical values, the 1933 Double Eagle, for example, selling for over $18 million, keeps the dream alive. If one coin can break records, why not another someday? That is the mindset that keeps collectors searching, hoping, and investing. In the end, the 1979 penny is not just about money. It is about history, artistry, and human fascination. It is about the sound of copper in your hand, the weight of a bygone era, the portrait of a man who changed the nation, the tiny details that transform metal into meaning. It is about stories whispered through generations, that a penny might be worth millions, that treasure might be hidden in plain sight. And whether you believe the claim of a $321 million penny or not, you cannot deny that the story itself is priceless. When we step back and look at the broader history of the Lincoln cent, the 1979 issue finds its place in a lineage that stretches back to the dawn of the 20th century. Introduced in 1909, the Lincoln cent was more than just another coin. It marked the first time a real historical figure, a president, was placed on regular circulating American coinage. Until then, U.S. coins were adorned with symbolic figures like liberty, designed to represent ideals rather than individuals. But the centennial of Lincoln's birth gave the mint an opportunity to break tradition, and Victor David Brenner's portrait of Lincoln became the face of America's smallest coin. This was revolutionary at the time, and not without controversy, but it set a precedent that would shape American coins forever. By the time 1979 arrived, the Lincoln cent had been in circulation for 70 years. It had outlasted presidents, wars, economic booms, and depressions. It had passed through the hands of farmers, soldiers, factory workers, students, and children saving pennies in piggy banks. In a way, the penny had become woven into the fabric of American life. And yet, by 1979, people were already debating its usefulness. Inflation had eroded its value. A penny could no longer buy what it once could. Still, the coin endured, not just as a unit of exchange but as a cultural icon. One of the reasons the 1979 cent is so interesting to collectors is that it represents the end of an era. Within just a few years, the composition would change to a cheaper copper-plated zinc planchet. The heavy, solid feel of the old cents would vanish. The copper cents of 1979 are like the last generation of a long tradition, carrying with them the weight, both literal and symbolic, of America's history. When you hold one of these coins, you can feel that difference. Collectors often say that pre-1982 cents are simply more satisfying to handle, to hear, and to look at. That makes the 1979 cent, though common, a sentimental favorite. And then there's the artistry of the design. Victor David Brenner's portrait of Lincoln, still sharp after decades of use, is a masterpiece of engraving. His choice of pose, Lincoln facing right, with a calm yet resolute expression, captures the man's strength and humanity. Over time, the dies used to strike coins wear down, and subtle changes creep in. A 1979 cent struck early in the year may show crisp detail in Lincoln's hair and beard, while one struck later may look softer, less defined. To the untrained eye, these differences are minor, but to a collector they matter. Condition and strike quality can make the difference between a coin worth a cent and one worth hundreds of dollars. The reverse design, introduced in 1959 for the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth, replaced the wheat ears of the original 1909 reverse with the Lincoln Memorial. Frank Gasparo's design has often been criticized for its simplicity compared to the beloved wheat reverse, but it has its own appeal. The tiny seated statue of Lincoln inside the memorial is a marvel of detail on such a small coin. Collectors sometimes delight in showing new hobbyists this hidden feature, as though revealing a secret. And in 1979, this design was still firmly in place, not to be replaced until 2009, when the Mint introduced a series of new reverses for Lincoln's bicentennial. What about value? The truth remains that most 1979 cents are worth only their face value. They were struck in such enormous numbers, billions upon billions, that scarcity is not an issue. But value in numismatics often comes from exceptions, and the 1979 cent has its share. Proof coins from San Francisco, especially those with the scarce Type II's mint mark, are highly sought after. High-grade mint state coins from Denver or Philadelphia can bring impressive sums at auction. Error coins, off-center strikes, double strikes, wrong planchet errors, can sell for hundreds or even thousands. And then there are the stories, the legends of pennies worth millions, which, though exaggerated, keep the dream alive. The idea that a 1979 cent could be worth $321 million might sound like pure fantasy, and in truth it is. No coin from that year has sold for anywhere near that amount. But the myth has power. It draws people into the hobby. It makes them look at their coins differently. It inspires them to learn about min-marks, errors, and varieties. In that sense, the myth itself adds value, not in dollars but in curiosity, in excitement, in the joy of discovery. Collectors today often search through rolls of pennies from banks, hoping to find hidden treasures. They know that most of what they see will be common, worn, and worth only a cent. But they also know that every now and then, something extraordinary turns up: a perfectly preserved coin, a rare variety, an unusual error. That possibility keeps the hunt alive. And when they find a 1979 cent, they know they are holding a piece of history, a coin that represents the end of the old copper era and the enduring legacy of Lincoln's portrait. It is also fascinating to consider how coins like the 1979 cent connect us across generations. A coin minted in 1979 could have been in circulation for decades, passing from hand to hand, from a child buying candy to a commuter paying for a newspaper to a grandparent saving coins in a jar. Each penny has a story, though we may never know it. Collectors sometimes speak of coins as silent witnesses to history, and that is exactly what the 1979 cent is. It has witnessed the years of the late 20th century, carrying Lincoln's image through a changing America, and yet, despite its ordinariness, the coin can become extraordinary. In perfect condition, with a rare min-mark, or struck in error, it can leap in value. In the stories told about it, whether of a penny worth hundreds of dollars or of a penny worth hundreds of millions, it becomes legendary. And legends have power. They keep us searching, collecting, and dreaming. When we start to compare the 1979 1-cent coin with other legendary Lincoln cents, we begin to see why collectors place such significance on even the most common years. Every Lincoln cent has the potential to hide a secret. Think of the 1943 copper cent, one of the most famous era coins in all of numismatics. During World War II, copper was needed for the war effort, so the mint struck cents on zinc-coated steel planchets. But a few leftover copper blanks from 1942 were accidentally struck in 1943. Creating a handful of copper cents that became some of the rarest coins in American history. Today, those 1943 copper cents can sell for hundreds of thousands, even over $1 million depending on condition. That story of the 1943 cent is one of the reasons people still search their pennies so carefully, and it is one of the legends that feeds the idea that even a 1979 cent could someday hold astonishing value. Another famous rarity is the 1955 double die cent. That year, a die used at the Philadelphia Mint was engraved improperly, creating a coin where the date and inscriptions on the obverse appear double to the naked eye. These coins entered circulation and were discovered by collectors, causing a sensation. Even today, a 1955 double die cent can sell for thousands of dollars, sometimes tens of thousands in higher grades. Once again, a penny that was once worth just a cent became an extraordinary treasure because of an error. This teaches collectors to never underestimate any cent, including those from 1979, because even in the most common years, mistakes happen. The 1979 cent does not have a famous double die like the 1955 issue, nor does it have a world-changing error like the 1943 copper, but it belongs to that same tradition of possibility. The billions of coins struck in 1979 mean that within them, there are rare varieties, errors, and conditions that turn the ordinary into the extraordinary. It is that chance, that possibility, that makes coin collecting so endlessly fascinating. Now let us turn to the economics of copper itself, because this plays an important role in understanding the 1979 cent. Throughout the 20th century, the price of copper fluctuated. By the late 1970s, inflation was driving prices higher, and the cost of copper was beginning to make penny production less practical. Each cent contained nearly 2.5 cents worth of copper at certain points in history, which meant that the mint was essentially losing money producing them. This led directly to the change in 1982, when the composition shifted to copper-plated zinc. The copper cents of 1979 therefore represent the last full era of real copper pennies, and that gives them a kind of built-in value. Collectors often talk about hoarding pre-1982 cents, storing them in buckets or jars, knowing that one day, if melting restrictions are lifted, the raw copper value will exceed their face value significantly. The 1979 cent is part of that hoard, part of that hidden wealth stored in plain sight. The copper debate also adds to the cultural significance of the 1979 cent. When people pick up a heavy copper penny and compare it to a modern zinc cent, they feel the difference immediately. That weight is not just physical, it is symbolic. It is the weight of tradition, the weight of history, the weight of something that feels real. In an era when coins seem to be disappearing from daily use, replaced by digital transactions and credit cards, the solid copper cent is a reminder of another time. That makes the 1979 cent, though only a penny, a link to the past. The collector's market in the 1980s and 1990s also played a role in shaping how we view coins like the 1979 cent today. During those decades, coin shows, auctions, and collector magazines spread awareness of varieties and errors. The rise of third-party grading companies such as PCGS and NGC in the mid-1980s revolutionized the hobby. For the first time, collectors could submit coins to be graded and encapsulated in tamper-proof holders, giving them confidence in the condition and authenticity of their coins. This grading system placed enormous emphasis on condition. Suddenly, a 1979 cent in perfect mint state could be worth far more than the same coin with even the slightest scratch or blemish. Collectors began searching rolls, bags, and boxes of pennies, looking for flawless examples that could achieve high grades. This emphasis on condition explains why some 1979 cents have sold for thousands of dollars. It is not because they are rare in the absolute sense, but because they are rare in perfect condition. Out of billions struck, only a handful survive without marks, scratches, or wear. To the untrained eye, one mint state coin might look the same as another, but under magnification, the grading experts can spot differences that mean everything in the market. An MS-65 coin might be worth only a few dollars, but an MS-67 could be worth hundreds, and an MS-68 could be worth thousands. That is the razor-thin line that separates common from valuable. As collectors compared their 1979 cents with earlier rarities like the 1943 copper or the 1955 double die, they began to understand that every year of Lincoln cents carries potential. And while the 1979 issue may not be legendary in its own right, it remains an essential part of the broader story. It represents the transition from copper to zinc, the height of mass production, and the era when coin grading transformed the market. And of course, there are always the stories, the whispers of a penny worth $321 million. While no reputable auction house has ever recorded such a sale, the tale itself adds an aura of mystery. It captures attention, stirs curiosity, and makes people wonder. Could it be true? Could there be a 1979 cent so rare, so unique, that it might someday command such a price? Logic says no, but imagination says maybe. And that maybe is what keeps the dream alive. For those who are new to the hobby, the 1979 cent serves as an entry point. It is a coin you can find easily in circulation, yet it carries layers of history, design, and possibility. You can hold it in your hand and begin to learn about mint marks, about proof issues, about varieties and errors. You can compare it to other Lincoln cents, trace its history back to 1909, and forward to the changes of 1982 and beyond. You can learn how to examine coins, how to grade them, how to store and protect them. In this way, the 1979 cent is not just a coin, it is a teacher, a gateway into the world of numismatics. And for seasoned collectors, it still holds interest. High-grade examples, rare-proof varieties, unusual errors. These are challenges to hunt for, trophies to add to a collection. Even after decades of study, new discoveries continue to surface. A previously unknown die variety might appear. A unique error might be found in an old collection. The story of the 1979 cent is not finished. It continues to unfold as collectors explore, discover, and share their findings. There is something deeply human about the way people respond to coins like the 1979 cent. It is not only about the metal, or the portrait of Lincoln, or the mint marks. It is about the stories that grow around them. For centuries, people have been fascinated by treasure, by the idea that something small and overlooked could actually hold enormous value. That same instinct drives people to buy lottery tickets, to dig for gold, to search for antiques in attics and basements. And with coins, especially pennies, that instinct is amplified because these little discs are everywhere. You could find one in your pocket, in a jar of change, on the floor of a car, or stuck between couch cushions. Every time someone hears a story of a penny selling for thousands or millions, their imagination sparks. Maybe the coin in their hand is the one. That is why stories of coins selling for astronomical prices spread so easily. When people hear of a rare cent from the 1940s or 1950s fetching tens of thousands at auction, the natural leap is to wonder about the penny they just found. And when rumors circulate of a 1979 cent supposedly linked with a value of $321 million, even though the claim has no foundation in actual sales, the story spreads because it appeals to our sense of wonder. Could it be true? Could something so ordinary be that extraordinary? The rational mind may dismiss it, but the emotional mind holds on to the possibility. And in coin collecting, possibility is everything. Auction houses play a central role in shaping these legends. When a rare coin comes up for sale, the news spreads quickly. Collectors follow the results closely, and when a coin breaks a record, it makes headlines in mainstream media. This happened with the 1933 St. Gaudens Double Eagle, a $20 gold coin that sold for over $18 million in 2021. That sale stunned the public and reminded everyone that coins, though small, can carry enormous value. It also fueled the imagination. If one coin can sell for that much, why not another? And so, even though number 1979 cent has ever reached such a price, the idea does not seem as impossible when placed in the context of other record-breaking sales. For ordinary people, hearing about million-dollar coins transforms the way they look at pocket change. Suddenly, the pennies they once ignored become potential treasures. This psychology is what makes the hunt for coins so compelling. It is not just collectors who care, it is anyone who has ever dreamed of finding a fortune in an unexpected place. The 1979 cent, with its billions of examples, is not rare in itself, but the possibility of discovering a unique error, a high-grade gem, or a special proof keeps the dream alive. The stories of people striking it rich with pennies are not myths. Real examples exist. A teenager might discover an unusual error in a coin jar and sell it for thousands. A collector might search rolls of pennies from the bank and find a doubled die worth far more than face value. These stories circulate in collector circles and sometimes reach the wider public, fueling more interest. While most people will never find a fortune in their change, the idea that they could is powerful. It turns an everyday object into a potential treasure chest. And when that object is a 1979 cent, a coin still common enough to be found in circulation, the excitement is all the greater. The psychology of treasure hunting goes even deeper. Humans are drawn to the unknown, to the thrill of discovery. This is why people search for rare stamps, collect baseball cards, or hunt for antiques at flea markets. Coins are particularly powerful because they carry official weight. They are stamped with authority, backed by the government, used by millions. When you find a rare coin, you are not just finding a mistake or a variation, you are finding a piece of history that slipped through the cracks. It is like holding lightning in your hand, something that should not exist but does. That thrill is addictive, and it is what keeps people searching. In the case of the 1979 cent, the thrill often comes from the details. The tiny differences between mint marks, the subtle variations in strike, the small errors that turn ordinary into extraordinary. These are the things collectors obsess over. To a casual observer, all pennies look the same. But to a collector, each one is unique, each one tells a story, each one carries potential. That is why they will spend hours hunched over magnifying glasses, examining coins that others would overlook. It is not about the penny itself, it is about the hunt, the chase, the possibility of finding something no one else has. The broader market for coins reflects this psychology. Prices rise not only because of rarity but because of demand, and demand is driven by excitement. When a new variety is discovered, when a rumor spreads of a rare error, when an auction sets a record, the market responds. Coins that were once ignored suddenly become valuable. Collectors rush to check their own collections. Dealers see increased business. Auction houses enjoy higher bids. In this way, the market is not just about metal or rarity. It is about stories, about the narratives that captivate collectors and drive them to ACT.SO. When we talk about a 1979 cent supposedly valued at $321 million, what we are really talking about is the power of narrative. No coin from that year has ever sold for such a price, and it is unlikely that one ever will. But the story of that number, the rumor, the legend, adds value of a different kind. It adds intrigue. It makes people curious. It drives them to learn about coins, to search their change, to discover the history of the 1979 cent and beyond. And in the world of numismatics, curiosity is the greatest value of all. The 1979 cent, then, is more than just copper. It is a key that unlocks a world of stories. Stories of design and history, of mint marks and errors, of collectors and auctions, of myths and legends. It is a reminder that even the smallest, most ordinary object can hold extraordinary meaning. And while it may never reach the astronomical price of hundreds of millions of dollars, it has already achieved something greater. It has captured the imagination of millions of people, inspiring them to look closer, to learn more, and to dream bigger. For many people, the 1979 cent is more than just a collectible or a potential treasure. It is a part of everyday life, a quiet companion to moments big and small. Think about how often pennies pass through our hands without us noticing. They rattle in change purses, pile up in jars, slip into the corners of drawers. For some, pennies were the first coins they ever saved as children, the building blocks of piggy banks and allowance money. To hold a 1979 penny, then, is to tap into those memories. It may have been the coin a parent pressed into a child's palm at a candy shop, the coin a teenager dropped into a payphone, the coin a family saved in a jar for years. Each cent carries invisible stories, and while collectors focus on grades, mint marks, and errors, the sentimental value is just as powerful. Childhood memories in particular give the 1979 cent an aura of nostalgia. People who grew up in the late 70s and early 80s often remember handling these copper coins daily. They were heavier than today's cents, with a warmth that only copper seems to hold. A child might have stacked them, rolled them across a table, or counted them slowly while dreaming of something bigger. Even decades later, when those children became adults, the sight of a 1979 penny could stir emotions, bringing back images of simpler times. This emotional bond is one reason coins remain so fascinating. They are not just money, but memory made solid. Coin roll hunting takes this to another level. Enthusiasts often visit banks to pick up rolls or even boxes of pennies, searching through them one by one. It is a modern treasure hunt, a game of patience and persistence. In those rolls, collectors hope to find wheat cents from before 1959, rare varieties, or mint-state examples of later dates like 1979. For the hunter, finding a gleaming, uncirculated 1979 cent in a roll is like striking gold. It is proof that treasures can still be found in circulation, that history is still hiding in plain sight. The act of searching through thousands of coins also builds respect for the small details. After hours of looking, the collector learns to spot subtle differences, to distinguish a Philadelphia cent from a Denver or San Francisco, to recognize doubling or misstrikes. This sharpens the eye and deepens the appreciation for coins that others might dismiss as ordinary. Everyday life also connects to the symbolic weight of the cent. Though inflation has reduced its purchasing power dramatically, the penny still represents thrift, patience, and the idea that small things add up. The old phrase, "A penny saved is a penny earned," may feel outdated, but it carries truth. Over time, countless people have saved their cents in jars or cans, only to be surprised at how much they accumulated. Among those countless pennies, 1979 cents sit quietly, waiting to be rediscovered. For some, rediscovery comes when they cash in a jar of coins. For others, it comes when they begin collecting and realize that those same jars might hold something of greater value. The copper composition of the 1979 cent strengthens its role in this cultural narrative. Copper is a metal that humans have valued for thousands of years. It was among the first metals ever used, shaped into tools, ornaments, and currency in ancient civilizations. The 1979 cent is part of that long lineage, connecting modern Americans to traditions stretching back millennia. To hold it is to touch not only history but prehistory, to feel a link to the deep past of human craftsmanship. The fact that pennies after 1982 lost most of this copper only enhances the aura of coins like the 1979 issue. They are not just cents, they are miniature relics of a time when even the smallest coin was made of solid, valuable material. Collectors often speak of the romance of copper. The way it ages, the way it darkens and tones over time, gives each cent a unique character. Some 1979 cents have developed rich chocolate brown patinas, while others still shine with fiery red luster. Each coin tells a story in its surface. A bright red example might have been stored away untouched for decades, while a deep brown coin might have traveled the country in countless pockets and cash registers. To examine them is to see history etched into metal, to witness time itself at work. This is why the 1979 cent continues to resonate. It may not have the instant fame of rarities like the 1909 SVDB or the 1955 double die, but it has a quiet importance rooted in everyday experience. It is a coin that almost everyone has seen, that almost everyone has held, yet within its billions of examples lie mysteries, stories, and treasures. And because of this, even the wild claim of a coin worth $321 million does not seem entirely absurd in the world of imagination. For collectors, imagination is half the fun. The truth is, the 1979 cent represents the intersection of three worlds. It is a piece of currency, used for transactions and commerce. It is a piece of history, carrying Lincoln's image and connecting to a century-old tradition of design. And it is a piece of personal memory, tied to the lives of millions who used it in their daily routines. Few objects in our lives hold such a combination of roles. That is why a penny can feel like more than a penny. That is why collectors treasure it, why stories grow around it, why people continue to search for it, And beyond all of this, the penny symbolizes persistence. Despite debates about discontinuing it, despite its declining purchasing power, despite the fact that most people ignore it, the cent continues. It endures. And the 1979 cent, with its billions of examples still out there, embodies that endurance. It is a survivor, a constant presence, a humble reminder that even the smallest things can last and matter. When we look at the 1979 1-cent coin, we are not only looking at copper struck with a date and a portrait, we are looking at one of the longest-running artistic tributes in American history. The design on the obverse, the portrait of Abraham Lincoln, was first introduced in 1909 to commemorate the centennial of his birth. The artist behind this portrait was Victor David Brenner, a Lithuanian immigrant who came to the United States with little but his craft and ambition. His design, simple yet powerful, has endured for more than a century, surviving political changes, cultural shifts, and the evolution of American coinage. To hold the 1979 cent is to hold a living legacy of Brenner's art, still relevant decades after it was first imagined. Brenner's choice of Lincoln was no accident. In 1909, the nation was eager to honor the president who had preserved the Union during its greatest trial. Lincoln was not just a political figure, he was a symbol of resilience, justice, and sacrifice. Brenner captured Lincoln's likeness in a way that was both dignified and human. His portrait does not show Lincoln as a distant, mythic hero, but as a thoughtful man, serious and wise, with the weight of responsibility in his gaze. This is the face that continued to grace every cent in 1979, connecting the modern coinage of that era with the ideals and struggles of the 19th century. The obverse design also carried subtle messages. The word, liberty, appears to Lincoln's left, a reminder of the core value for which he stood. Above his head is the national motto, "In God We Trust," which by 1979 had become a fixture not only on coins but on the national conscience. To the right is the date, in this case 1979, and below it the small mint mark indicating whether the coin was struck in Philadelphia, Denver, or San Francisco. Each detail was carefully placed, creating a design that is balanced and meaningful. Even the spacing of the letters, the curve of the text, and the proportions of Lincoln's portrait contribute to the harmony of the design. Turning the coin over, the reverse of the 1979 cent displayed the Lincoln Memorial, a design first introduced in 1959 to mark the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. This was the work of Frank Gasparo, who later became chief engraver of the United States Mint. Gasparo's design was ambitious, attempting to shrink one of America's grandest monuments into the small space of a cent. While some critics found the design too cramped or busy, it carried symbolic weight. By placing the memorial on the back of the coin, the cent honored not only Lincoln's life but the way he was remembered by the nation. The memorial itself had become a site of reflection, a place where Americans gathered to pay tribute, and its appearance on the cent brought that sense of reverence into everyday transactions. Look closely at the 1979 reverse and you will notice a tiny detail that often goes overlooked. Within the memorial, between the central columns, is a minuscule engraving of the statue of Lincoln that sits inside the real memorial in Washington, D.C. It is barely visible to the naked eye, but under magnification you can see it. This is an extraordinary feat of artistry and engraving, a small tribute within a tribute, a detail that demonstrates the care and craftsmanship that went into the design. For collectors, this tiny hidden Lincoln is a delight, a reminder that coins are more than functional objects, they are works of miniature sculpture. The design of the 1979 cent also speaks to America's identity at the time. The late 1970s were a period of challenge and change for the nation, with economic difficulties, political scandals, and shifts in culture. Yet the cent carried the same portrait of Lincoln, the same mottos, the same symbols of unity and perseverance. It was a reminder of continuity in a world of change. Every time someone saw Lincoln's face on their penny, they were reminded of the values that had carried the country through harder times. The cent was not just money, it was a pocket-sized piece of national character. Artistry on coins has always been a reflection of the values a nation wants to project. In ancient Rome, emperors used coins to broadcast their power and divine favor. In medieval Europe, kings placed their images on coins to assert authority. In the United States, the choice to place Lincoln on the cent was both political and symbolic. It said that America valued unity, democracy, and the courage of individuals who defended those ideals. By 1979, that message had become so ingrained that people no longer thought twice about it. Yet, when you pause to reflect, you realize that every 1979 cent carried with it not only copper and design but a message about what it meant to be American. The artistry of the cent also invites reflection on the role of coins as everyday art. Unlike paintings in museums or sculptures in galleries, coins are democratic art forms. They belong to everyone. A masterpiece like Brenner's portrait of Lincoln is not locked away for the wealthy. It circulates in billions of examples, passed hand to hand by ordinary people. The 1979 cent is an artwork that millions held without even realizing it. And that, in many ways, is the greatest triumph of coin design. It makes art part of daily life. Collectors often emphasize this point. When they study a 1979 cent under magnification, they are not only looking for mint marks or errors. They are admiring the craft of engraving, the flow of lines, the way light plays across the surface. They see the coin as both artifact and artwork, as both object and symbol. And in doing so, they elevate the cent from something ordinary to something extraordinary. Even beyond artistry, the symbolism of Lincoln on the cent has grown deeper with time. Lincoln's image has appeared on the cent longer than any other portrait on any other American coin. It has become more than a commemoration, it has become a tradition, a fixture of American identity. The 1979 cent is part of that tradition, a chapter in a story that continues today. And because of that, it holds meaning far beyond its 1 cent face value. To understand the 1979 1 cent coin fully, we must consider the economic context in which it circulated. The late 1970s were a period of significant change and uncertainty for the United States. Inflation was high, the cost of living was rising, and everyday Americans felt the pinch in their wallets. Gasoline lines, rising grocery bills, and increasing interest rates made people acutely aware of the value of money. In this environment, even the humble penny carried a subtle but meaningful weight. While 1 cent could no longer buy what it once did, it remained a symbol of thrift and careful budgeting. Families saved them in jars, children collected them for allowances, and merchants often rounded totals with them. The penny, including the 1979 cent, was a part of the rhythm of daily life, grounding Americans in the economy even amid uncertainty. The rising price of copper added another layer of significance. By the late 1970s, the cost of producing a cent had started to exceed its face value. The mint was aware of this, and debates began about whether to change the composition of the penny to reduce production costs. This context makes the 1979 cent historically important. It is one of the last pennies struck in the classic 95% copper alloy before the switch to zinc-plated steel in 1982. That means every 1979 cent carries not only the history of design and minting but also the economic story of a nation on the cusp of a major transition in coin production. Collectors prize these copper cents not just for their condition but because they represent a bygone era when a penny was literally made of valuable metal. The economic pressures of 1979 also influenced how the public interacted with coins. People were more aware of change, more conscious of the value in their pockets. Saving pennies was not just a habit, it was a practical response to rising prices. Children's piggy banks, jars of coins on kitchen counters, and small collections in bedrooms became microcosms of personal finance. Amid this environment, the 1979 cent was everywhere, a familiar object that linked everyday life to the broader currents of economic reality. In many ways, it was more than currency. It was a tactile reminder of the times. Coin collectors of the period also took note of the changing economic circumstances. They understood that copper pennies could hold intrinsic value beyond face value. Even if they were not rare, pre-1982 cents contained copper that could be melted down for profit if regulations allowed it. While it is illegal to melt U.S. pennies today, the idea of copper content added a layer of fascination for hobbyists. Suddenly, the 1979 cent was not just a coin, it was a small store of wealth, a metal artifact whose value extended beyond monetary face. This awareness helped spark the modern coin collecting craze, as people began to see coins not just as tools for commerce but as investments, historical artifacts, and cultural symbols. Inflation and economic uncertainty also influenced perceptions of rarity and value. In a time when money seemed to lose purchasing power rapidly, the idea of a stable, tangible object that could hold or grow in value became appealing. Collectors and ordinary people alike were drawn to coins as objects that could transcend the volatility of the economy. The 1979 cent, firmly embedded in everyday life yet part of a tradition of copper coinage, was perfectly positioned to capture this attention. People could buy, save, and later discover something of value, even in a coin they once thought trivial. The role of the 1979 cent in commerce also reflected changing technology and habits. By the late 1970s, coin-operated machines were widespread. Vending machines, payphones, and arcade games required coins, and the penny remained central to small transactions. The tactile experience of handling coins, of pressing them into slots, counting them carefully, or giving exact change, created a personal connection that is harder to achieve in a modern digital economy. The penny was both functional and symbolic, a small object that tied daily life to national currency and historical continuity. Economic realities also influenced the minting process. With billions of cents struck each year, the mint had to balance quality, speed, and cost. The dies used to strike coins wore down over time, and errors occasionally slipped through, giving rise to varieties and mistakes that collectors today prize. From off-center strikes to doubled dies to subtle planchet differences, these anomalies are part of the story of the 1979 cent. They remind us that even in mass production, human and mechanical factors create uniqueness. And those unique coins, born of both skill and imperfection, are the ones that capture the highest value today. Finally, the 1979 cent serves as a reminder of the enduring symbolism of money itself. In a period of economic flux, a small, familiar object grounded Americans in daily life. It was a reminder of saving, of history, of cultural identity, and of the possibility that even small things could matter. Whether held in a child's hand, stored in a jar, or examined by a collector under magnification, the 1979 cent carries layers of meaning. Its value is not just copper or face value, not just rarity or error, it is the connection between people, history, and economy. In that sense, the coin transcends its physical form and becomes an artifact of American life in 1979.